Infertile neighbor says I'm not allowed to sunbathe in my yard because I'm pregnant, and it upsets her. My husband, 29, and I, 28, have been living here for 5 years, ever since we married. Our previous neighbors were an adorable couple in their 60s or 70s, and we had a fairly good relationship, and we were kind of sad when they left. This year, I gave birth to my son, who's now 6 months old. My new neighbors, let's call them Paul and Anna, moved in when I was 2 months pregnant. We weren't friends, but we'd say hi to each other here and there. I sunbathe every day. It's something I've been doing since childhood. I was a very anemic kid, and my mum helped me to do it to help with my anemia. I don't even know if it works, but it is a habit that helps me start my day. This was not a problem until my pregnancy became apparent. The left side of the yard has 2 kinds of fences. One low, about 1.5 meters, that used to have a hedge on the neighbor's side, and Paul and Anna cut it down. And one taller fence, 2 meters, around the rest of the backyard. It's hard to see it from the ground, but they can still see our whole yard and part of our main floor from their second floor. When I was 5 months pregnant, Paul told my husband that my sunbathing was making them uncomfortable. I sunbathe in shorts and tank tops, nothing out of the ordinary. I just ignored them and kept my routine. The following month, he complained again. Complained every month until the 8th month of my pregnancy. I was back from a walk with my husband and Anna was in front of the house. Once she saw me, she stormed inside and slammed the door. The following day, Paul came to our house and told us they have fertility problems, and seeing me pregnant was making her heavily uncomfortable, and I was an insensitive witch. Currently, I'm working from home and the baby is close to me in a playpen in the living room, and we have another in the backyard on the terrace, so I can have him close to me when gardening or just playing with him. Well, apparently I made his wife uncomfortable again yesterday. I was in the living room, playing with the baby, when Paul knocked. He asked me to move from the living room because his wife could see me from their balcony. I told him to look the other direction and to leave me alone. Today, my husband and I were just grilling some meat in the backyard. The baby was hungry, so I started to breastfeed. When I looked at their house, Anna was on the balcony. She went in, and a few minutes later, Paul was at our door again. I gave my son to my husband, and I answered the door. Paul went off on me for breastfeeding in public, again, my fenced yard, and for being inconsiderate. When he finished, I told him to leave us alone and to not knock on my door again. And if his wife is so upset over seeing a baby, she needs therapy and not him harassing my family. And I'll do everything I want in my own home. At the time, I felt justified, but I was venting to my mum later and she told me I was wrong, and I couldn't really understand because I've never suffered from infertility and I need to apologize to Paul and Anna. We're also talking to our lawyers about a restraining order. He told us to get some footage because until now we only have our word and our other neighbor's testimony. And if Paul shows up again to record it, and to call the cops. If he came to my house 5 times, to call the cops each time. But still, it'll be hard to get a restraining order. So we've begun to try and ensure our privacy a little better. I sat down with my husband to talk about precautions. I was so annoyed that I hadn't actually been thinking about the real risk that this couple could pose. We'll be installing cameras and a taller fence. Unfortunately, their vision from their balcony will stay the same because the city won't let us build taller than 4 meters. But this will help anyway. I called my dad to get some help with the fence, and he ended up talking to my mum. She called and apologized to me. She suffered from infertility and postpartum depression, and when I spoke to her, she said she felt Anna's pain, but she also remembers that some of the stuff she did at the time was crazy and she regretted it later. She gave me some extra precautions to take. So, am I the jerk? Definitely not. As you've mentioned, these people clearly need some therapy. I can't believe that they'd behave this way every time they see women and babies in public, so asking you to just not exist in their line of sight in your own home is absolutely ridiculous. I do feel a little bad for Anna. She's clearly feeling a lot of pain at not being able to be a mother, but I should restate, I'm not just saying she should get therapy so that she and her husband stop being a pain in the butt. The more important factor would be helping her come to terms and acceptance with her hurt and being able to be around families without feeling as sad. Paul is also just trying to protect his wife from what he likely knows is a source of emotional turmoil. Unlike a lot of our stories, I can see why these people are taking their actions, even if they are 100% in the wrong. With all that said, if they don't take better steps to help themselves get over the problem, then sadly the best thing the author can do is working out better ways to protect her family from them. like cameras, privacy, and potentially a restraining order. I'd be a little concerned at how they'll behave when you have a loud toddler in their visual and hearing range instead of just a baby. I was refused database access and told to submit tickets. So I submit tickets. This happened back at my last job in 2018. To give some background, I was working as a data analyst at a company in the ed tech sector. For one of my projects, I created a report that we could give to the sales team that they could then use when asking clients to renew their contract. Clients were typically school systems or individual schools. The report was all graphs, even adults like pretty pictures, and it showed the clients data on how teachers and students were using the product. Then our sales guys could show, hey, X% of your students and teachers are using this feature X times a week, so you should sign a new contract with us. And then I developed this report for our biggest client and had the top people in the sales team all put in their input when developing it. The big client renewed, which was great. They loved the report and wanted to use it for all renewals, and we had more than 5,000 clients. I had to automate the process and everything seemed peachy until I hit a problem. The data for the report was pulled from our database, MSSQL if you're curious. Now I was in the research department and I didn't have access to the database. Instead, our IT team had exclusive access. If I wanted data, I had to put in a ticket, name all the data points I wanted, and I could only name one client per ticket. Also, IT did their work in sprints, which are typically 2-week periods of work. The tickets were always added to the next sprint, so I ended up having to wait 2 to 4 weeks for data. This was fine for the big client report, but now that I was running this report for all renewals, the ticket system wasn't going to work. Now, if you've worked with sales, you know that they typically don't plan out 2 to 4 weeks ahead. At least they didn't at my company. So I reached out to IT and requested direct access to the database so I could stop putting in tickets and just pull the data myself. I even asked for read-only access so I couldn't muck up anything for IT. It was all cloud-based as well, so they could just dynamically get more compute if I pushed the limit. Well, that request was immediately denied. All data requests will be filed by only IT. And as a research person, I apparently needed to stay in my lane. You might see where this is going. I wasn't happy and sales wasn't happy with the delay, but there was nothing anyone could do. So, I reached out to one of the sales managers to discuss a solution. Since data was going to take 2 to 4 weeks to arrive, could he please send me everyone that has a renewal coming up in the next 2 to 4 weeks? With more than 5,000 customers, that averages about 100 renewals a week. He smiled and understood what was going on, and happily sent me a list of more than 400 clients. Quick note, the IT team spends the day before a sprint planning the next sprint, and all tickets submitted before the sprint had to be completed during the next sprint. The sprint planning time was always Friday afternoon because the least amount of tickets rolled in. During the planning session, they'd plan all the work for the next 2 weeks, for the next sprint. Any tickets that came in before 5 p.m. on Friday had to be finished over the next 2 weeks. Time for my malicious compliance. Armed with my list of more than 400 clients, I figured out when the next sprint started and cleared my schedule for the day before the new IT sprint started. Basically, their sprint planning on Friday. At about 1 minute a ticket, it was going to take me about 6 hours and 40 minutes to submit all the tickets, so that's what I spent my entire Friday doing. Let's not forget they had to get the data for all the tickets during the next sprint, as long as I submitted them before 5 p.m. on Friday. That meant they had to take care of all 400 tickets in the next 2 weeks. Plus, I submitted tickets throughout their sprint planning meeting, so they couldn't even plan for it all. Now, if you're not tech-savvy, this might not make sense. But if you are, let me add an extra twist to this. They used Jira at the time, and the entire IT team had the Jira app on their laptops. Most of them had push notifications set up, so they got pinged every time a ticket was submitted by yours truly. I would have paid good money to be a fly on the wall during that meeting and watching a new ticket pop up about every minute or so. The only way to make it better would be to have a script running that could submit the tickets for me. Now, I wasn't a good enough coder at the time to do it, but if it happened today, I would totally do that. Alright, tech stuff aside, I didn't hear a peep from them at all that Friday. And to their credit, Monday I started getting data from my tickets. Now, I'd automated the reporting process on my end, so each report only took me a few minutes to run. I was churning out reports as quickly as I received the data, without an issue, and sales was loving it. I saw tickets coming in from every member of the IT team, and during the second week, many tickets came in after working hours. So obviously, they were struggling to keep up. Again, I'll give them full credit, they fulfilled every single one of the tickets, but there were a lot of long days for them. Everyone here was on salary, so there was no overtime pay either. This was, of course, on top of all the other tickets they needed to complete for their day-to-day jobs, so it was quite a stressful sprint. Undeterred, I met with the sales manager again right before the next sprint and asked for the next set of clients with renewals. Then, the day before the next sprint, I began submitting tickets again. My workday started at 9 a.m., and by 10 a.m., the head of IT ran over to me. He was bug-eyed and asked me how many tickets I was planning on submitting. I told him the same amount as last time, even though this time I only really had 200, but he didn't know that. And I'm pretty sure I saw him break on the inside. I did feel bad at this point, so I said, alternatively, you could just give me access to the database and I could query the data myself. I had the access before noon. In short, IT says I need to submit tickets for data instead of giving me direct access. I submit hundreds of tickets until they relent and give me access. They didn't want to trust a lowly researcher, so I made them my data monkeys. Am I the jerk? Well, a fair bit of the tech talk flew directly over the narrator's head, but nonetheless, this is a really funny story. To be honest, I wondered if you were going to automate some sort of process to speedily submit all the tickets on the last hour of the Friday or something, and make them stay up until the crack of dawn. But honestly, they were all probably demoralized enough already. It's a fine line between teaching someone a lesson and absolutely torturing them. A lot of the more tech-savvy commenters were remarking that this sort of insistence by IT that everything be requested and run through them is far from unusual and causes all sorts of hold-ups in all sorts of jobs. I'm sure that IT do have their own reasons. Most likely it's an accountability thing, but yeah, it seems like they quickly decided in this case that being able to more exactly pinpoint where problems came from was less important than not having to flog themselves to death on what should have just been a routine job. Also, I'm kind of amazed that you had to resort to this rather than reporting to someone else that multiple teams were being held up by this routine and that you had to use an entire workday to submit tickets on something that should have been no trouble at all. Definitely a little jerky, but also funny, so you get a pass. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Sure, I'll take down my negative Yelp review. This happened to me a few years ago. I was owed a significant sum of money by the company which handles my doctor's billing. She worked at a large healthcare system which outsourced billing to this company. For months and months, I tried via email and phone to get the money back, but each contact I was treated rudely or ignored. They would either say they were still working on it or would act like I'd never requested the money in the first place and needed to start the process over. It was maddening. One day, after receiving another rude email from this company, I decided to leave a Yelp review on my doctor's page. I essentially said that while the doctor and her staff were helpful and professional, the billing company they used was atrocious and made the entire experience not worth it. Lo and behold, the very next day I got a call from the CEO of the billing company. He asked what the problem is and I explained. He says, "Okay, I'll make sure the money gets sent ASAP. Can you please take the review down?" Apparently, he was getting angry calls from my doctor and he seemed pretty pressured to get it taken down. I respond that I can take the review down after I get my money back. He gladly accepts my offer. A week later, there's my check in the mail. Here's the thing though, I never specified how long until I'd take the review down after I got the money. So I waited a week. I got some calls and texts from the CEO and I ignored them. I waited another week. Respond that I'm having technical problems logging into Yelp, but should have it resolved soon. After about 6 months of him reaching out and me being as unhelpful as possible, I finally took it down. The next time I returned to that doctor's office, it was a whole new billing system. Not sure if my review made a difference, but it was sweet malicious compliance regardless. Update. I went back to review my correspondence with the billing company. It made me realize the whole situation was even more screwed than I'd originally described here. The reason they owed me money was because at first my insurance company had told me they were not going to cover the appointments because the doctor wasn't in network. However, I found the doctor through my insurance website. When I went back to check, the doctor's name was no longer listed on their website. Luckily for me, I'd taken a screenshot at the time so I could have the phone number for the doctor on hand. After I sent the insurance company the screenshot, they agreed to cover the appointments. They paid the billing company, and yet the billing company refused to refund me the money I'd paid. So essentially, they were collecting both from myself and the insurance company and trying to get away with it. American healthcare in a nutshell. Also, when I told my wife about this post, she told me I need to make a correction. The CEO sent me a check within 4 days. It wasn't even an entire week, after months and months of reaching out to them. I'm not going to provide the name of the billing company. I don't need any more drama with them. The insurance company was AITA. Seriously, screw them. Screw all insurance companies. Sincerely, a narrator who is still waiting on a payout from one of his a year later. But back to your problem. That seems quite criminal even by the standards of most of these organizations. I can understand why you wouldn't want to take things any further after all the hassle you've been through, but perhaps it would be worth seeing if other people were having serious problems with them as well, and whether they'd have grounds for some kind of group lawsuit. I hope that there weren't any angry looks from your doctor the next time you visited them. Although you obviously specified it wasn't her fault, it might have affected some people's decision on whether to use her going forward. Then again, it seems like she upgraded and everyone is probably better for it. It's quite funny that the company was clearly small enough that one Yelp review merited a personal response by the CEO of the company. They were clearly a combination of being quite a small insurance company themselves and one that wasn't doing quite well for this to happen. But then again, if they were deliberately withholding several grand worth of double-dipped finances, that company definitely deserved to die. Author is not the jerk. Parent wants to be updated for misbehavior and gets hit with a monsoon of phone calls. Some background, this takes place in a preschool with 3-year-olds. At this school, many of the teachers have children attending here, obviously because they get a big discount, which isn't a problem. Most of the teachers don't mind their child's teacher reprimanding or redirecting their behavior as they are teachers themselves. But then there's entitled admin. She's the annoying admin who would call in the middle of our lessons to remind us to take pictures of the kids or stupid stuff like that, which we do every single day. She loves to micromanage everyone. I've had several issues with her in the past over these phone calls, as have other teachers. Entitled admin had a son in my class. We'll call him Tiny Monster. He wasn't actually a bad kid overall, but when he would act out, yikes. But my co-workers and I, we work in teams, could easily handle him. However, entitled admin would constantly tell us to call her when he acts up. Now the thing is, we don't call parents for misbehavior, so why would we call her? We don't do it for any of the other teachers who have kids here. Tiny Monster is just like other 3-year-olds. We can easily redirect him, which is why we couldn't believe she wanted to be involved in the first place. She finally blew up at my coworker and I about it, saying how he never gets prizes and if we just called her, he'd behave better. When I left, I looked at my coworker, who looked super annoyed, and a plan came to mind. Cue malicious compliance. Every time Tiny Monster would misbehave, I called the front office. Got up during lessons? Called. Talked back? Called. Screamed at us? Called. Told a friend he was stupid? Called. Going to pee too much? Called. Didn't cover his mouth when sneezing? Called. Anything slightly out of the ordinary, we called up front to let entitled admin know what was going on. Let me tell you, these phone calls really added up. She had physically come to the room after each call the first day, but pretty soon she started getting annoyed and would just say, "Thanks for telling me," by day 2. So the fallout. After 3 days of calling for little things, another admin came to talk to us about why we're calling so much for one student. We explained entitled admin's request, and she laughed at how ridiculous it was to have us do it in the first place. She talked to entitled admin and explained it was unreasonable to have us call when we don't call other parents. The requests to call her stopped, and we continued on with the school year. It's not a huge malicious compliance, but it was a victory. You generally think that the people who work in education wouldn't fall prey to the same foibles that make some parents in these stories such unaware jerks. But here's proof otherwise, or at least an exception that proves the rule. I know enough teachers to know that any parent who demands an excessive amount of special treatment is going to be subject to ridicule from every member of staff in a given school. I'm absolutely certain that being in the staff room, this front desk lady has heard all the gossip about entitled parents and their ridiculous requests, which is part of why this whole situation strikes me as being so weird. And she's also clearly a bit of a jerk for exploding at the other teachers like this. And the fact that when confronted with the reality of what she was asking, she just kind of disassociated and stopped responding accordingly, that's hilarious. Clearly the other admin person had a much better idea of how to behave. Great story, thanks for writing in. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.